G'day everyone and welcome to Monday night, everyone's favourite Monday night entertainment and information segment with CLUBMAP. Tonight it's grants and funding for your club. And I'm Mark Campbell, by the way, one of the co-founders of CLUBMAP, but I'm joined by our COO, John Knudsen, who keeps the wheels turning at CLUBMAP and makes sure everything happens the way it's supposed to. Before we do kick off, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of lands we're meeting on, wherever we happen to be in Australia, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. But just about CLUBMAP, for those who haven't joined us before, we've been around for about 10 years now, and those figures down below might be a little bit out of date, but let's say they're true. 3,500 clubs we've helped one-on-one, and we reckon it's probably around about 20,000 actual administrators from clubs, local and grassroots up to second tier, and that includes governing bodies, leagues, associations and councils. We really do have a unique view of what's going on right across the community landscape. So tonight is going to be in 4 parts. We usually roll this way. We're going to look at grants and just see what they are and what you're missing out on if you haven't dipped your toe in that water. Part 2 is how to be grant ready, and there is a process, and we're going to let you in on it tonight. Part 3, a few little tips and hints that just can help ease the way a little bit and help you get a little bit more success than you may have already had. And of course, part 4 is how we can help you do that. We always finish up with a Q&A.
Grants is a missed opportunity. And what does the current grants landscape look like, I guess, overall? It's a bit similar to, I guess, most of the topics that we cover in all our webinars, whether it be revenue streams or even other initiatives. If you don't ask, you don't get. Clubs tend to use grants as a bit of a reaction to a desperate need, as opposed to being strategic with applications, aligning the club's needs to grants and with the whole community in mind. And it is a little bit sort of ad hoc at times. When working one-on-one with clubs, the feedback we often get is that grants it can be too hard, and it's often the first thing that gets pushed to the side when dealing with the day-to-day, week-to-week of running your club. As with most of our topics, as I mentioned before, often there's no one really looking after the grants, which we'll check the results in a second. We'll see how that goes at your clubs. Time poor and just unaware of what's out there and what can be funded. If you're paying for it already, chances are there's a grant that could cover it, and if it's on your wish list, chances are there'll be a grant that pops up that could cover it at some point. And it's often just not really discussed amongst the committee at all. So yeah, and there can be some disappointment woven in there as well. There are a lot of questions in the registrations about unsuccessful grants, what to do, how to chase that up, how to get some more information. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. But we often hear comments and questions like, "Oh, we didn't get a council grant last time. Why should we help them with whatever project or initiative they're trying to implement?" Or we've tried that grant a couple of times, we're unsuccessful every time. Why bother again with other grants? We'll cover all those sort of things tonight and why it is so important and why they are a missed opportunity. But so yeah, very rarely is grants seen as a major fundraising and fund saving priority. It can be both. As I mentioned before, it's often just a little bit ad hoc and often in reaction to something as opposed to being strategic. We don't think there's any reason why any club, regardless of size, shouldn't be targeting at least $10,000 in applications. Obviously, there's no guarantee, but in smaller grants each year, $0 to $5,000 applications. So a couple of those $5,000 applications as an example. Larger clubs definitely should be aiming for at least double that. Sounds like some of you out there are doing that already, which is outstanding. There are a lot of factors at play with grants. Hopefully tonight we can share some ways to make that a possibility if you're in not quite hitting those targets or don't even have any targets at the moment. Mainly tonight we'll be talking about smaller grants, smaller to major infrastructure grants and funding. There's a lot more involved in those, and we'll have a facilities webinar which we'll come back to at the end a little bit later in the calendar year. So another one coming up which will have some information about funding and different avenues there for facilities and even sort of minor infrastructure upgrades. So keep an eye out for that one. But tonight will be mostly about the smaller grants. So yeah. Mark, did you want to jump in here and sort of set the scene for how to be grant ready?
Yeah, thanks very much, John. I was just looking at the questions. They're starting to come in, and there's some pretty interesting stuff for us to look into later on. Yeah, now how to be grant ready? It's a really good question, and it comes back to something that John was just talking about. He said, let's be strategic about grants, and being grant ready is about having a strategy in place. It's looking forward to the year ahead and saying, what do we need? How are we going to pay for it? Let's make sure that grants as part of that big plan. So if you have a think about it in that strategic matter, it suddenly makes a whole lot more sense. And there's a few things that we can do. So this is the starting point. This is your launching pad. And John's just going to take us through some of the do's and don'ts around how to actually make sure you're in the game.
Yeah, really good way to put it, the launching pad. Without most of these steps, it is really tricky to have success with grants. Step one is to have a grants coordinator, grants officer, whatever you refer to it as, a person to look after grants. That's their only gig. If you go back to any of our webinars, we talk about this. Allocation responsibility just gives it the best chance of success. Quite often, grants are left up to the president, the secretary, or the treasurer. Obviously, quite busy roles at most clubs anyway, particularly if you are in season or inside of your competition or near one of your events, whatever sport you're involved with. Grants just fall to the wayside, and it can be a really important time if your council only has 1 month of the year where your grant is open, and that just happens to coincide with a really busy period of time around at your club, chances are you're going to miss that opportunity. So having someone solely focused on grants is really important. It doesn't necessarily have to be a committee role, as long as there's a good lines of communication between someone on the committee. You've got access to all the information, and there is a wish list in place, which we'll get to in a second. It can be a relatively easy role to fill. Another one that is generally a pretty good entry level volunteering position, can be done remotely by anyone. I know a lot of clubs find someone who may have moved away from the club but still wants to be involved in some form or another, and it can be done from anywhere really. So keep that in mind. We do have PDs on for just about every role in our resources hub as well. So if you do have access to that, check out the resources hub, and you can have a look at the position description for what we think could be involved in the roles and responsibilities involved with looking after grants at your club. So essentially, you just want to make it easy for people to help, and having their role on a page, ask them the question. A really good way to go about it. Step two is to create a shared grants folder. So if you're using something like Tidy HQ or even a Google Drive, Dropbox, something like that, one folder dedicated to grants. I think this one's just a screenshot of a club from, I think it's Maxine's club. Store all your common documents in there, incorporation certificate, financials, all that sort of stuff. We'll come back to a bit of a list a little bit later. Have a look at the Be Grant Ready checklist. Again, come back to that a little bit later, but just somewhere where everything's stored. So whether it's the grants coordinator or the treasurer or anyone involved who might need to make sure that there's some information for those grants, they can go there and either place the information or access it really easily. Step three, add grants to the agenda and come up with a wish list. So make sure that it's an agenda item at your committee meetings, whether it's the grants coordinator is referring to it or someone overseeing that area. Anything that's on the horizon to do with grants is really important. If you've got a wish list, outline, say, the top 5. This is just an example of a football club. Outline the top 5 funding priorities that your club wants to identify. If you're planning out the next 12 months coming up soon, in the next couple of months or so, make sure that you've got some funding priorities on there. What's on your club's wish list? There's no two clubs will be the same, but this is just an example of a football club we came across some months ago. They want to improve the club's operations. They want to run a couple of current try days for some junior participants. They wanted some storage for their equipment, or extra storage for their equipment. They need a new club website and some fixed shade next to some of their fields. So keep that in mind. We'll come back to that list a little bit later, but having a wish list and adding grants to the agenda just means that it's front of mind and it's talked about at your club regularly. Step 4, register for notifications. So quite often people aren't quite aware of what's going on with grants, when they open, when they are opening. Make sure that you're registered with your local state and federal member as well. They have grants that pop out, your local council. Consider different types of grants. Register with your local Bendigo Bank, any other philanthropic groups in your area or to do with your sport, your governing body, whether it be your league, association, your state body, federal body. Register with them if they've got something available. Some of them will have a website, some will have a page on their website. Any sort of regular communications that you can get sent to you that involve grants and when things might be opening and any opportunities that you might be eligible for. Make sure you register for those so that you're aware of what's coming down the line. There's a few listed there, obviously, just some standard grants. We'll come back to that list a little bit later as well. And then finally, step 5 is to gather all your key club information. So any stats and member information. Overall, anything that may be requested in an application by the funding body, put that in your shared grants folder. All your club documents, your current strategic plan, as I said, member and participation stats, any team breakdowns, public usage of your facility as well, particularly if you maintain your own grounds or your track or your field or whatever it might be. Make sure you've got some public usage stats on there, any demographic breakdowns you can get your hands on, letters of support from council, from governing bodies, from leagues and associations as well, minutes of meetings where you discuss grants and applications and what you're trying to get funded, project plans. The list goes on. There's a list there. The Be Grant Ready checklist is in the Resources Hub as well, again, if you've got access to that. But even facility guidelines for those smaller infrastructure grants as well, if there's anything in there that you can align to your wish list, can be really important. But anything to do with grants, you want to put them in your grants folder so that you've got easy access to them whenever you're going for an application, just to speed up that process. The last one, it's really good to have a succinct overview of your club. If you're starting from scratch, who you are, what you do, and where you're going is a really good place to start. It can be handy for most applications to just get a handle of where your club is at.
Well, here we go. We're really getting down to it now. It all starts with the planning, doesn't it? It all starts with thinking about what you need. You've got to be able to apply for things. Great. What are we going to apply for? What does your wish list look for? And once you've got that, where are we going to get the money from? And these are all things that John's going to take us through in a moment. One of the things we're going to touch on, though, is AI, which is just taking over life, it seems, at the moment. Every time you turn around, there's a story about AI intruding on this or that or the other thing. But gee whiz, if you're running a club, it can be so incredibly helpful. And so we're going to touch on that. We're also going to touch on how you can stand out from the mob, how you're going to make yourself elevate above those around you so that you're the one who get your greedy mitts on the money, and what to do if you miss out, because let's face it, you're not going to win everything you go for, but just because you get knocked back a couple of times doesn't mean you drop your bundle. So there's a few tips and hints that go with all of those things, and I think just stay tuned for here, because this is really where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. This will be a little bit more in depth. We'll go through some lists and a fair bit of information. So if you do have any questions as we're going, feel free to throw them in the chat as well. How to make the most of your application, basically, and what you might consider funding. So first, we just want to walk through some application top tips. Being eligible for a grant doesn't necessarily mean suitable. So you want to make sure that your program or project is suitable for the grant, applying strategically, ensuring it fits the guidelines, not just it's something that loosely fits the guidelines, we're going to apply for it and hope for the best. Excuse me. Make sure across those guidelines as well. Assessment criteria and funding priorities are really important aspects of the guidelines. They'll inform what types of projects are given preference. Often there are a few elements to any project that would be given preference within a grant application. So if you can align the project to as many of those guidelines and funding priorities as possible, you give your application the best chance of success. be sure to consider if your project can be tweaked slightly to better satisfy that assessment criteria as well. Is there something you could bolt on to make sure that it fits those criteria? Ensuring there is a wider community benefit is always a good idea, a good way to give yourself the best chance as well. Who outside of your club could benefit from your project or your program as well? Are there other clubs involved? Are the general public going to benefit from your minor facility upgrades, as an example? Those sort of things. It may seem a little bit obvious, but make sure you have all the required information. You'd be surprised at how many applications we come across don't have all the required information that's asked for. And always check the previous recipients as well, and what has been funded in the past. Often that'll give you a really good line on what might be worth applying for your club as well. And use their language and be present as well. Answer the questions directly. Don't be too waffly. If it says 150 words, doesn't mean you have to go to 150 words. Be visible, be present. If it's a council grant, make sure that you're liaising constantly with the council. Attend their grant workshops if they run them. We hold a lot of grant webinars for councils and things like that. Make sure you are attending whatever you can. You want to be present. Keep your club front of mind. And the other thing I wanted to mention here briefly is club contributions. There's a couple of questions on this topic as well, but some grants it's essential where a percentage of the total amount has to be provided by the club towards the project or whatever it is. But even if it isn't, it's always a good idea to allocate even 10% of the grant towards from club funds is a good way to elevate your club's application. Next is some key phrase tips as well for your consideration. Ensure that your application is goal or mission driven. So how those project goals align to the priorities and the guidelines of the grant. So making sure that those things line up is really important. It's always really good to highlight any collaboration and partnerships with other community stakeholders, co-applications, or if you're applying on behalf of a couple of other clubs as well that will benefit from it. Always highlight those within your application. If the grant asks for it as well, make sure to highlight if it is capacity building, focus on how it will help volunteers. A lot of the grants that we help clubs apply for our services, as an example, really fit into this bracket, and making sure that you can demonstrate how it's going to help volunteers and do their job within their club is really important, and can elevate just about every application. You might include some desired outcomes as well, some tangible, measurable results that you expect to see after 6, 12 months, 2 years, etc., and how you're going to measure that as well. And then how do you plan to evaluate it down the track and hopefully improve on whatever project or program you're introducing? In most cases, any sort of long-term sustainable improvement would overshadow any sort of quick wins, unless it's a quick response grant, as an example, which is in the title, pending those guidelines, of course. But most of the time, if you are thinking strategically, thinking about long-term benefits for your club, you're going to set yourself apart. So I mentioned before there was the example wish list that the football club had. What we want to do now is highlight how you can align your wish list to potential grants that might pop up. So this football club, they wanted to improve their club operations. They wanted to run a couple of come and try days. They want to get hold of some more permanent storage, new club website, and some fixed shade. So what they've done is they've gone away and listed those. They've got their wish list in place, and they've gone ahead and grab some quotes or just some rough prices for what it might cost to complete all those projects for their club. And then they've got that list there. They know that improving their club operations, they want to work with us to run a couple of workshops. They want to run a come and try day. It's going to cost about $1,000 to get some new balls, mini goals and cones and some shirts for the kids. So a permanent storage shed for the facility, about 22 grand, $1,000 for a new club website, and then some fixed shade for a couple of big shade sales in between their pitches. So they've been able to get some quotes, align them to what they want, and then they can go ahead and search for suitable grants and match them to their wish list and the amounts that they're looking for. So it just so happens that this club had a council grant for about $5,000. So they're able to build club capacity through volunteer training. Sporting club grants, really good for those up to $1,000 participation equipment type grants. The local sports infrastructure fund up to $300,000 this is a Victorian club for facilities, another really good one. Most of those smaller facilities grants have to be in conjunction with the council, so there's a lot more to that. That's why we'll cover that in the infrastructure webinar. And then again, the sporting club grants program, you can tack on multiple things now. So they want to add on $1,000 for digital capability to upgrade the website, and then the council community infrastructure grants up to about $200,000 for the works there. So they want to look at that for the fixed shade, particularly shade, anything that's anything around fair access or accessibility. Really important now, particularly in Victoria with the fair access policy. So any of those minor works that will improve health, safety, accessibility, really really prominent. So a lot of the guidelines will align to your project. So that's just a really good way of taking what is a fairly basic wish list that the club came up with at a round table. Got some quotes involved, and then they're able to match them to suitable grants. Now, not all those grants are going to be available and open at the same time, obviously, particularly for the council grants. They might have the infrastructure grant might be later in the year and earlier in the year for the sporting club, for the volunteer training grant. But if you've got your wish list there and you've identified which grants might be applicable for your wish list, you can then apply strategically, and as soon as it comes around, as soon as you get notification, you are ready to go because you've got all the information there ready to go. So keep that in mind. Really good way of just going through it in that 3-step process. So when you are thinking about your own wish list for your club, think about what your club needs essentially. We always start with volunteer training because that's what we do, and it's really important, and we know what kind of effect that has on clubs. Uniforms, digital adaptation is really popular now. Any events that you're doing, holding minor events that have a broader community impact, can be really popular particularly with council grants. If you're holding big club days or events where other clubs from other regions or other councils are coming to your facility, that is a major event day. Quite often there are grants that can help with the running and organisation of that. Equipment, minor facility improvements, larger infrastructure projects, anything and everything. I mentioned off the top, in most cases, if you are paying for it already, or if it's on your wish list, there will be a grant that pops up at some point that will cover it. Obviously, it's just how you word that and how you can weave into that application, how it's going to meet those guidelines. So keep that in mind. Particularly if you're unsure, ask the council, ask the state government, get the feedback on your application. So where to look for grants? Firstly, there are a lot of different grants that are available. State and local council grants are generally the go-to for most clubs, and they often fall into one of these 4 brackets. Quick response grants, it's written on the can, might be a response to a natural disaster, flood, etc., or theft. Usually, they're the 2 big ones. And then you've got minor grants, which are usually around $2,000. Some volunteer training, usually equipment, things like that, tend to fall under those under that bracket. And you've got major community grants, usually between $5,000 to $10,000. These often cover business planning, strategic planning, master plans in conjunction with council. Some larger uniform grants fall into this bracket for new female teams or all abilities programs, those sort of things. And then there's usually up to about $100,000 is the smaller facility upgrades. Not complete rebuilds, obviously, more like more smaller projects, kitchen or bathroom upgrades, scoreboards, playing surfaces, sports-specific infrastructure, goalposts, that sort of thing. So they tend to fall into that bracket as well. And that's usually where most clubs start and finish with the list, but there are a lot more that do pop up. But quite often, clubs will focus generally on the minor or major grants because they tend to be the ones that pop up every year and are front of mind. Other grants to look out for and some tips are to look into any corporate social responsibility grants, basically big business that wants to put back into community. Coles, Budget Direct, Bendigo Banks, etc., etc. The list goes on. Even just going through a quick Google search, you'll be able to find quite a few opportunities. Quite often they are online applications. We tend to suggest, if possible, go to your local branch or outlet or store directly, because then you can start to build a relationship and there tends to be a bit more of a personal connection there. So if you can do that. Digital grants, I mentioned a couple of times already tonight, often aimed at businesses, but most of the small business digital adaptation grants incorporated associations can apply for in most situations, not all. Really good for upgrading databases, websites, point of sale, like Square type systems, finance software, etc. And then there's a lot of other grants, whether it be through again a Google search or something like Grant Guru, which we'll come back to a little bit later, but the Australian Sports Foundation, Sports Commission have got a list on their website. Other philanthropic organisations often have grants for community organisations. If you don't ask, you don't get, basically. So again, whether it be utilising ChatGPT or other websites, Google, etc., just do a bit of a search and see what you can come up with. Good bit of feedback there. Sorry about that. I mentioned ChatGPT. This last one we just wanted to touch on is just a response, a couple of minutes on how to build out a response using ChatGPT. We don't want ChatGPT to write it for us, essentially. You want to feed in your information, but highly recommend, if you haven't done it yet, highly recommend giving ChatGPT a go to help with your applications. Makes it easier, puts it into paragraphs and responses that can meet all the guidelines. It will only provide whatever you put into it. So it's not like Google, where if I search for the same thing as Mark does, we're going to get the same result. It doesn't work like that. Whatever you feed into it, it's going to generate a new response. So I've just got a quick example video, which I'll talk to as we go. It takes a couple of minutes, but it just shows how easily in a couple of minutes you can go through and produce a fairly succinct response to a grant question. So this is a question that comes up in quite a lot of grant applications. Who will benefit from uniforms or equipment, and how will they benefit from them? Uniforms and equipment grants are really popular. So what you want to do is list out, what I've done here is just list out this is a bowls club applying for new equipment and some online marketing as well to help with their come and try days. So you just list out what's involved, highlight it, what you want to cover and what you want to include in your response. Copy and paste that into ChatGPT. Obviously, you want to be polite and ask that you want to please prepare a grant response for the dot points. I've done this 1.5 times perhaps. So paste in your the following grant question using these points below, and then please keep it under 150 words. Most grant questions will have a limit to the words, and hit go. See what it comes up with. So that's an example of how quickly it can prepare a response like this. Have a read over it. Quite often it can be a bit waffly the first time around. I'm going to ask it to refine this, because just reading through it, it's a bit wordy, it's a bit much. It's a fairly concise question that you want to answer. It just goes into a bit too much. So what I want to do with some positive reinforcement is to simplify the language and see if it can just trim it back a little bit for us. Simplify the language, yeah. It just trims it right back, uses much simpler language, and it's a lot more of a concise response. Then you can copy and paste that back into your document. And you've got the bones of a really nice, concise little response to that. What is a fairly common question within grant applications. Always have a read over it again, just to make sure. I've got the paid version of ChatGPT, which sort of understands how I write and how I read and all these things and what I want. Quite often it'll give you extra, the double hyphens. It'll give you the US spelling of organizations or maximize and things like that. So make sure you can actually ask it to do that in the responses as well, or you can just go back and edit it yourself. But always have a read over it. Make sure that it sounds like you and your club, and it covers all the points that you want to cover as well. It's not bulletproof, but it's it can really speed up the process when you are applying for grants. So definitely give it a go. Sometimes it can take a couple of prompts to go back and forth to get it right, but it's well worth it just to make sure you're on target. So that's ChatGPT. Another really popular question we get is how to stand out from the competition. First, we always suggest reaching out to the grants officer before you apply for the grant, or a representative from the funding body. Make sure your project or your program is eligible. Any information that they might be able to hand over as well. A really good way to make sure that you are visible in the eyes of the grant funding body. Incorporate any key data, any way that you can include some membership stats, demographics. Your club health check through us as well can be a really good indicator. If you're going for something like, say, volunteer training as an example, and your club comes out needing some work in your club health check. I know a lot of our applications that we do with clubs includes our club health check. Any collaboration between organisations, I mentioned that a few times, really important to include that. Club contribution, I mentioned it before, whether it's a percentage of the total project or if it's just in volunteer time. So make sure that you include the volunteer time into that. So how long is it going to take for the volunteers to implement the project or the program as well? That is still club contribution, is your time and effort. So make sure you include that, and let us supporting documents. Anything you can include to bolster your application can be vital. And then finally, if you are unsuccessful with any grant applications, there's a real opportunity to learn and improve. Feedback is a gift. Always seek feedback where possible. Most funding bodies will provide it. There are a number of factors that you have to consider when allocating, they have to consider when allocating funds. It could be the pure weight of applications, something minor in the funding priorities you didn't address in your application. Always think of it in a constructive manner. Don't throw out the brace and bits. Review the learnings against what you've done again, and where possible, foster the relationship further. Attend workshops, be visible, consult with them, etc. And then revise the application. Most of the time, the grant will open up again later in the year or the following year, and tweak it in readiness for that grant so it's ready to go next time. Providing the guidelines don't change too much. Most of the time they stay fairly consistent, but just always be wary of that. That they can change year on year, but if you've got a revised application there that's meeting a few more of the criteria, you've got an application ready to go. So just a few tips there. Hopefully you got some information out of all of that. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Hopefully, I think I've missed a couple, but we'll come back to those at the end. There is we walk through the how to be grant ready. We've got an expanded version of that in our blog on the website, so clubmap.com.au/blog. So you can check that out. We wrote that one in conjunction with the Australian Sports Foundation. So some good tips in there. Just an expanded version of what we covered tonight. And if you haven't done so, subscribe for free to our CLUBMAP Wrap. We include some grants in there, some other tips and bits and pieces, news. We do it monthly ish most of the time. So there's a link on the website there as well. If we've got some time at the end, I'll throw the link in the chat too. And you can jump in our CLUBMAP community Facebook group as well. So particularly Ken, but our team, whenever something comes across our desk, we do share links and tips and bits and pieces in there as well. So quite often Ken's quite active in sharing some grants and bits and pieces in there too. So yeah, keep an eye out for that one. And just a quick grants update. We do this every webinar as well. Just some grants that are open, usually state grants. The Victorian State Sporting Club Grants Program usually opens late October, early November. So it's sometime in the next couple of weeks. There's different grant categories, really popular grant. So be prepared for that one. That's opening soon. Grants that are open most of the year round: Tasmanian Community Fund, the New South Wales Club Grants, and the WA Regional Community Grants. So we always share those ones. The SA Sports Vouchers Plus, if you're not registered as a provider and you've got junior participants, make sure you are registered. The ACT Club Enhancement Program is still open, closes this Friday. So that one's particularly popular for clubs wanting to engage with our workshops as well. So if you want any information or if you want some assistance, tick a box at the end. We'll help you with that one. And same with the Queensland Community Benefit Fund. That one closes at the end of the month. I might throw it back to you, Mark, to chat about our services. As we do every webinar, we just like to share a bit about what we do and how we could help your club if you do need some help.
Yeah, let's flash through this, because I know there's a few interesting questions in the chat. But we have some tools that are available to people to use, and really, how can you fix something if you don't know what's wrong? And so the club health check's a really good thing to do, even if you don't want to take it any further, just to find out what's going on inside your club. It's amazing what being asked the right questions can reveal. So get onto that health check. It's a really good idea. And what the health check leads you to is to our resources hub, because once you know what's not going well for you, you can then apply some of the learnings that are available in the resources hub to your own situation and actually get things back on track. And as you can see on the right there flashing through, there's all sorts of different topics that you can find out about, and we've got videos, we've got documents, we've got templates, we've got blogs and recordings of these sorts of webinars and all sorts of things that you can jump into for less than $1 a week. So do yourself a favour, as Molly Meldrum used to say. Get involved, get into it. And the gold standard that we've got is really the planning workshop. This is where we started right off the top. I was mentioning the fact that you've got to be able to plan ahead, but that in itself is a skill. How do you actually plan? And what we do is we show people how to do things. And it can be a little bit overwhelming, I think, for people to sit in these Monday night webinars and think, well, how in the hell am I supposed to get all this done? These CLUBMAP guys are great at telling us, what to do and how to do it, but I haven't got the arms and legs available to me to be able to do that. That's the starting point. If you get involved with a workshop, the first thing we do is lay it all out so you can go, so that's how you get it done. That's how you find the people to do the jobs. That's how you find the money to be able to afford to do this, that, and the other thing. It's an actual process, an actual formula. And the planning workshop is where you find all that out. So if you've got $3,000, or you think that you might want to apply for a grant for $3,000 for the gold standard, that's money that will come back in spades. The return on investment on the planning workshops is right out of this world. I do want to move this along, but let's hear from Chris from Lagana, because these people have just knocked it over the fence for 6. They've just done such a fantastic job in a relatively short period of time. Can we hear from this? Yeah, the video is going to run, so listen to this for a success story.
I'd heard it on all of the promo material that you guys have got about better volunteer recruitment and those sorts of things. Wasn't sure how it would play out, but what it's done for us is changed the way that our club runs and made it fit for purpose. If I look back 12 months ago, it was 2 or 3 people doing most of the work. The changes have been huge for us. So thanks to the help that you guys gave us, we've figured out how we can split roles down and not rely on too few. It's been pretty amazing on that space. And in the last 12 months, we've lifted our profile in so many ways. We've got more members from within the community that don't necessarily play, that come down and watch games. The scope of what we've now been able to do to be more part of that community, the build of the day will come, but being part of that community has been massive, absolutely massive. It's exciting times for us though. I said that 12 months ago.
Yeah, he's a good bloke, Chris, and they've got a fantastic club there, and they've really found their way since engaging with us in the workshop. It's all laid out for them, and they just follow the plan, and it's worked out brilliantly for them. So you can fund your own workshop, or as I said earlier on, you can apply for a grant to get one up and going at no cost to your club. We will help you do that. So I can't stress this enough. It's really the starting point for so many success stories. There's a poll popped up. John, do you think we should engage with that now?
Yeah, if you just want to turn up and listen to us on a Monday night, feel free to hit no thanks. But if your club does need some help, whether it's with a grant application for our services, if you'd like to complete a club health check, a really good tool to go through and just have a bird's eye view of how your club operates, off field, off court, off pitch. Feel free to tick that one. And if you just want some more information as well. So Chris from Lugano is a great example of a club. I think they ran a couple of workshops with us. Both were funded through 2 separate grants that we helped them apply for. So really a really good way. We want to help wherever we can. And if we know that getting a few grand together to run a workshop and get 12 months support from us can be tricky for some clubs out there. So if we can help fund it for you so the club's not out of pocket, we'll do whatever we can. I saw, Evelyn, I just saw your question pop up. The Resources Hub for clubs is, we've actually made it cheaper. We want to make it accessible to clubs wherever possible. So it's $149 plus GST, so 163-ish off the top of my head. $163 for the club, and you get 10 users in that for a club, so 10 accounts basically, or the individual is $49 for one person just to access it for the Resources Hub. So hub.clubmap.com.au, you can purchase both online, or if you want to get an invoice, just shoot us an email and we'll send you an invoice for the over and out from us. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Hopefully you got some good stuff, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.